Hello, everyone. Today is Friday, October 23rd. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Nguyen. Today, beverage of choice is just water. Today, we'll be talking about buy lists. Buy lists are one of those things that have existed for a long time. They have slowly adapted and changed with the market as things have become more modern. Buy lists have kind of adopted and changed as well. So today we'll kind of go over them. They do have their uses. It does seem like one of those things that's a little antiquated and kind of behind the times, but they are something that is necessary in the industry. And right now, more than ever, because we don't have real life events, because there's less people going to their game stores, people are looking for ways to sell their cards. So buy lists is just one of those ways. A lot of people have started to look at selling online themselves via TCG Player, eBay, various third-party platforms, Facebook, etc. But it is worth noting that buy lists are useful. They're useful on all ends of the spectrum. Even for me as a vendor, as a business, there is a place for me to use buy lists. Buy lists are something that I reference. So no matter where you are in this hobby, buy lists are something to be aware of. And using it more as a data point is something that will be very, very beneficial for you, especially when it comes to pricing, realizing what the competitors are, etc. So we'll just go ahead and hop right in. So what is a buy list? I'm sure most of us are probably aware buy lists are fundamentally a list of cards with buy prices on them. Usually they come from vendors. And usually what they are, vendors are, hey Mark, thanks for tuning in. Glad to have you with us. Glad you're enjoying the content. The concept of buy lists is usually for vendors to basically publish to the public what they're paying on cards. At its core, that's what a buy list is. Buy lists can be long, short. You have hot buy lists, right? You have online buy lists. You have paper buy lists. These are all things that have that are different qualities of buy lists that have changed over time. The concept of buy lists, to my understanding, kind of started at events. For those of us who have attended events, who have attended Magic Fest, Grand Prix, various, whatever, what have you. Vendors look to buy cards. That is really kind of the fundamental reason why vendors go to events. Selling cards is something that is done naturally. You will naturally, as a business, be selling cards rather through your online platforms, TCG Player, eBay, what have you. If you list them online, if you have a brick and mortar store, stocking your cards in store and selling them, that's something that happens naturally. But as we see in the case of a pandemic, it becomes more and more obvious that having in-person events, having these Magic Fests, places for people to come and gather, right? Pokemon regionals, what have you. Having these in-person events is absolutely invaluable for most of these businesses because they need a way and they need a place to be able to buy cards. And being able to buy those cards is really how they keep their inventory stocked. That's how they keep their inventory flush. That's how they keep being able to churn through their inventory to be able to buy more. So if they have more to buy, they have more selection, they can sell more. If they have more to sell, then at the next event, they have more money to bring. With more money, they can buy more, right? We can see how this cycle works. That's really the function of buy lists. That's why we have seen buy lists become so prevalent over the past few years. And buy lists is something that a lot of businesses have started to adopt. I've started to see it more and more at the local game store level as well. Usually, they're not quite as flushed out as kind of a more specialized event, right? When you have a Magic Fest, you have people that are only Magic vendors. For example, you have a team of buyers who know Magic fairly well. Most people are Magic players themselves, or they have extensive experience inside the Magic hobby, so they know how to be buying cards. So at events, usually in the past, what we've seen is there's usually hot buy lists, which are usually the cards that vendors are paying the biggest premium on. Sometimes, from an outsider perspective, it looks random. I've been doing this long enough. I know that when I first started, I looked at them and I would sometimes just think, why is this card on there? Why is this card worth putting on your hot buy list? And the game within the game is that these buy lists are kind of ways that vendors are able to use the data that's available to them. Usually, most of the time, your buy lists are consisting of cards that have high margins, so things that sell that have a pretty large difference in price. So sometimes you look online and you know that if the TCG low on a card, for example, is $10, right? Most buy lists nowadays, right, depending on where you are, right, some of your smaller game stores, maybe they are not flush with cash, they don't have as good of a cash flow, maybe they're only paying 33% to 50%. That's kind of what I've seen for game stores in terms of cash buy lists. At events, sometimes people do tend to be a little bit more aggressive, right? Sometimes some of the bigger vendors, they know that there's a large price disparity. They're paying maybe 60 to 70%. So on $10 card, right, in your local game store, you might be getting $3, $4, $5. At an event, most vendors may be paying $6 to $7. Sometimes, if it's worth putting on a hot buy list and people know about this, right, there may be vendors that are paying $9, so you're getting 90% of the value. And usually the case for this is that there's some sort of price disparity that the vendors may be privy to that your average consumer is not. So a very simple, straightforward example of this is Commander cards. If your store, if your community has a following for Commander, maybe you want to be paying that premium on some of your Commander staples that you know that your players will be eating up. So getting them on your hot buy list, and people that come by and see these cards, they'll see, man, this person's paying 90% on this card. What else are they going to be paying well on? Maybe I should sit down with them and sell them my cards. So fundamentally, that's really the function of a hot buy list. That's kind of how they have existed in events. It does kind of create this kind of tension between other vendors. Obviously, with an event, there's only so many people to go around. There's a certain number of vendors. Vendors have to be able to split the cards between them. So they have to be able to incentivize you as a consumer. Why should you sit down with us? What reason do we have over another vendor? Why should you sit down with us over another vendor when between you, there's 10 other vendors, right? What advantage is there to this vendor versus this vendor, etc.? And usually the way that vendors get edge is to utilize these hot lists. Over time, the hot lists have become a little bit more elaborate, and this is something that real life events have kind of put on pause, but we have started to see these hot buy lists, they become more elaborate. We've seen people start to use technology, so TV screens, ways to be able to adjust buy lists on the fly. In the old days, which makes me sound really old here, in the old days, at events, people would usually print out buy lists. So you would just have people, they would just print out a stack, 500 or so copies. They would just put on the table and you can just grab them and walk away. This is something that does still kind of exist, but it's becoming phased out very rapidly. Prior to this year, when everything was kind of put at a stop, Magic Fests and vendors and kind of the MTG finance community have become very adept. They've become very privy to what's going on. So you have a lot of people that are very competitive regarding buy lists. They know really what the best buy lists on which cards are out there. And this really kind of puts a lot of pressure both on vendors and players to be able to seek out the best buy lists and be able to compete with each other. So you have a lot of times you have vendors that will match other buy lists just to be able to get the card. Sometimes if that, standard mythic is the card that's in demand right now because it's performing the best, right? If we were to still have events right now, right, we'd probably see I don't actually even know what's good in standard anymore. I just don't really follow. Prior to its banning, right, Omnath would probably have been on the card because Omnath was just everywhere, right? It was just the best card in standard. Every deck was playing it. That would be the type of card that would be on the hot list. And because most of these, because vendors would obviously be aware that Omnath is a big deal. It sells very quickly. A lot of people who play standard are going to need this card. I want to make sure that I'm paying as much as I can to be able to have this card in stock for my players in my store, or even if I have to sell them online, I know they're going to sell online very quickly. because there's a lot of demand for this card. This card is the best deck and part of the best deck in standard, etc. So for vendors, their edge is, again, being able to use some of the data that's available to them. For vendors that use Crystal Commerce, for example, or TCG Player Pro, you have this data in front of you. All this data is available to you. That's probably going to be a big part of what goes into developing your buy list. Vendors know that I've sold X number of copies of this card within the past day, within the past week, within the past month, right? These are very simple parameters to set up. These are very simple parameters to search for. With this data available, you can know that, well, if we sold X number of copies of this card within this past week, and this other card sells twice as fast, we probably need to be a little bit more aggressive about this card sells twice as fast. Maybe instead of paying 70%, we need to be paying 80%. We may not be making as much. We may be making 10% less due to a price difference, but because it sells so fast, because we aren't sitting on the card as long, it's okay to pay that little extra premium. And it's okay to pay a little bit more because we're just going to sell it through all of it anyways, and we can just take that money and use it towards something else. So that's really what exists for vendors. Again, events are kind of put on hold, so we'll have to kind of see that if in the future events do pick up again, if people start feeling comfortable going to big events and gathering together in Magic Fests, convention halls, etc., we'll have to kind of see how buy lists will pick up. But on the surface, it is very clear having these in-person events really generated a lot of liquidity in the market. It really made the market more efficient, as opposed to now, when I know there's quite a few people who are dealing with trying to sell cards, right? You have a lot of people that are new to selling online. They're basically trying to turn over the cards that they don't want / don't need anymore, and now they have to deal with, okay, how do I get rid of this? Because if your option is, well, like a lot of people, they make a trip out to Grand Prix Vegas once a year is kind of their big yearly get together with friends, being able to sell cards, etc. That didn't happen. So if that was their yearly outlet, that's gone. Maybe they're not close to a game store. Their game store is closed. Whether closed down permanently or just kind of closed for the season, just to let the current pandemic kind of ride itself out. Or maybe they're just not buying cards in person anymore. These are all experiences that I've heard from various people around the world. So your experience varies, but again, this really just highlights how important it is for buy lists to exist, how important it is for these events to increase the efficiency and liquidity of the marketplace. So from that, right, real life events, real buy lists have kind of changed as a result. A lot of stores have started to adopt an online buy list. This is a way for you to easily and quickly go online, look at their buy list, look at their store, see how they're doing, and being able to sell your cards. So the process is fairly straightforward for online buy lists. For places that have them, we'll kind of look at some of them today, and we'll just peruse. And I'll share my experiences with various buy lists, and we'll just kind of talk about how you as a consumer, if you haven't had the experience before, maybe this is how you would go about approaching it for the first time. So online buy lists, usually you have to make an account with them. You provide some of your information, just so that they have your shipping address, etc. And you basically, depending on which buy list, there are some that get around this, you basically just enter your card, you search for your card, you look at the buy price. Usually the buy price, it is important to note that sometimes when you're looking at buy price, it's a little bit deceiving. The buy price that is usually posted is for a near mint version of that card. If you have a card that's light play, moderate play, heavy played, etc., obviously there will be price deductions. So with Card Kingdom, they kind of do percentage based depending on which format it is. Sometimes it's like 100% of the listed buy price for near mint, then it's 80% for LP, 60% for MP, it just kind of scales down from there. So that's something to consider. So when you're looking at your cards, it's important to be relatively strict when it comes to grading them. When you are grading them, you want to be looking at it from the eyes of the person that is receiving your card, from the eyes of the person that is going to be processing your buy list, because when they grade it, right, any deductions that you're going to get are going to be from things that they see. So if there's if there's visible wear on it, right, at the best it's going to be LP. Usually I recommend when people are grading, they use the condition guide. Most websites do publish their own condition guide. TCG Player has their own condition guide for their buy lists. Star City does, Card Kingdom does, right? Everyone has kind of a condition guide, what metric they use to determine what condition your card is. So if you're going to send off your cards, I would go through and be very, very critical about your cards. And because the honest situation is that most of the time when people send off cards, they're not critical enough. People send off cards that they're missing. They don't look at it closely enough, and they think that, oh, this could pass as an LP when really it should be MP. This is kind of a pitfall that people fall into, and then all of a sudden they're surprised, why did I get less money on my cards? Well, your cards weren't in as good of a condition as you thought they were, so you're probably looking at, a 20% deduction kind of across the board, which is definitely a bummer. This is something that does take some getting used to. This was one of the benefits about dealing in person at events as well. In person at events, you could, by dealing with someone in person, by handing someone a card, they can look at it right away and they'll say that, well, I can normally pay you $10 on this, right? But this is a little bit more played than my normal price, right? I'd be at $8. And then right then and there, you can choose whether or not you want to accept it, right? Okay, that's fair. Like, this card is clearly played. I didn't notice that, right? I'm fine taking $8 at $10. Or you can deduct it right away. Whereas online, it starts to become kind of a problem. They'll send you their offers, and you can choose to accept or reject it. Some places, like Card Kingdom, they actually will adjust the price and make you accept automatically. This is something to be aware of. Some people think that this is something that they're trying to scam you on. Realistically, they're not. There are things you can do. Star City actually has a stop. You can choose to auto accept their offer. So anything that is knocked down on condition, that you'll just automatically accept the offer. Anything you can choose to reject any cards so they'll automatically, anything that gets knocked down on condition, they'll just send back to you, or you can choose it if it falls below a certain price threshold. These are all things that when dealing with online buy lists, you have to be a little bit cognizant of. For now, I'll kind of start talking about the different buy lists that I use. These are things, again, I simply use them as a reference, as a data point. Sometimes I'd rather sell to a buy list than have to list and wait for it to sell, right? This is a matter of convenience. Before, when we started talking, and people ask, when do I sell? Right? The first question I presented to people, if you watch that video, was, okay, do you want to put in more work and get more money, or do you want to put in less work and get less money? It's a silly concept, right? But you can't get the maximum amount of money if you're not willing to put in the work for it. And that's really what buy lists are. Buy lists are there as a matter of convenience, as a way for people to deal with their cards in a relatively painless manner. So we'll kind of start going through and looking at some examples. Again, things that I share here, these are my personal experiences. This is kind of how I approach using buy lists. So your experiences may be a little bit different. And some of these may have changed over time. Some of these I haven't used in quite some time. So things may have changed. But again, personal history, this is what I've done. This is all anecdotal. Make sure you take it with a grain of salt. Make sure you're looking at their policies, at their terms and conditions, right? These are all things that you want to look for before you just willy-nilly start sending your cards off without understanding kind of what goes into it. So first, we'll use Card Kingdom. Card Kingdom is kind of the go-to for most Magic players, in a sense that most people and almost everyone knows about Card Kingdom, so that's a good starting point. It's not some fictitious website where people say, oh, like so and so is paying this much, right? If you reference a Card Kingdom buy price, everyone knows what you're talking about. Everyone knows, okay, Card Kingdom is paying this much. If I should be reasonably competitive, I should be in that ballpark. I saw this all the time at events, right? People would sit down, people would say, will you match Card Kingdom? And then that way I know that there's a reference point that I can compare what Card Kingdom pays to what we pay. And if we're in the ballpark, depending on what it was, sometimes we could make a deal, sometimes we couldn't. So Card Kingdom, the biggest advantage for them, and really why they've really established themselves as the kind of go-to name in the industry, is that they generally have very high buy lists across the board. Realistically, though, it is not possible for one place to have the highest buy price on everything. Every store has to deal with market inefficiencies, kind of variations in the marketplace. What works for me at my game store may not work for Card Kingdom at their game store, which may not work for you at your local game store in wherever you are, right? If you're not in Oregon or Washington, for example. So every place is a little bit different. We know this, right? We see this if you've been to your local game store. You have different communities that develop, right? A lot of game stores are very EDH centric. A lot of game stores are very competitive centric, and you have the crowd that is always going to be buying standard, modern, pioneer, legacy staples, etc. So you have to understand that Card Kingdom, while it has high buy prices on some things, they may not be the highest across the board. And again, that kind of falls back into using the hot buy list. This is one of those things that is, I don't necessarily want to use the word deceiving because I feel like that's a little disingenuous, but a lot of buy lists are made with the idea that they're going to lure you in, you're going to sit down with them, and then in addition to them buying your hot list cards, right, you're going to see that, okay, this card they're paying 90% of TCG low on. Okay, let's start selling them those cards. And usually, most of the time, you'll probably sit down and you'll probably sell them other cards in addition to the hot list cards, right? There's not a lot of people that will just say, okay, I have these cards on your hot list, right? Will you buy them? There are a few of those people. Some of those people always exist, right? They're just trying to min-max, which is perfectly fine. But a lot of people, if you are already there, you're sitting down with a buyer, a lot of times they'll say, hey, can I look at the rest of your binder? Or do you have anything else for sale, right? This is kind of a relatively simple strategy, right? You're already there. You're already sitting. You're already engaging with someone. Why not let them look through? Because most people think, well, I probably have some cards I don't need, right? Just go through my binder. I don't need anything in here. Feel free to pull out whatever you want to buy. And on those cards, because those cards aren't on the hot buy list, because those aren't the cards that are moving the fastest, that people aren't necessarily buying, you're not going to get the 90% number that you would otherwise be getting. You're probably going to be getting kind of the more standard 60 to 70%, 75% number that is kind of across the board on most cards, and that's usually what you see. Card Kingdom, again, really no different. The idea is that they're going to entice you. You're going to type in some of the cards that you maybe want to get rid of first, right? So maybe you're looking to offload your modern deck, for example. You'll type in your modern cards. Okay, these buy prices are reasonably high. I'm pretty happy with those. If I have to pay the money to ship this package to them, I may as well look to see what else I want to sell off. And then next thing you know, right, you're starting to go through more and more of your cards. Before you know it, you're sending them like a one-row box full of crap that you don't need off to their buy list. So one of the things to remember about Card Kingdom, there are some advantages to using them, and these are the things that are important to note. Card Kingdom has an algorithm in place that determines the price on their buy list. There's also a cap on how many cards you can sell them. If you type in a card, right, there's a when you type in a card, next to the name there is a quantity pull down box, and it pulls down and it'll show you how many copies of these cards they're willing to buy. Sometimes there are definitely cards where they have it on their buy list. There is a number. Maybe they don't want a lot of copies. Maybe they just want a few copies. So sometimes you'll just see one copy. They're only going to pay one copy at this price. After that, once their algorithm determines that they've hit that cap, maybe this card doesn't sell fast enough, they're going to lower the buy list. If that card sits there and no one sells them, that buy list may stay the same. Maybe there's more demand for this card. Maybe they go from only accepting one copy to now accepting 4 copies, 10 copies, 20 copies, what have you. There are cards on there where they know they'll sell enough of, right? We think about something that is kind of evergreen in all decks. Sol Ring, for example. They will probably buy hundreds and hundreds of copies of Sol Ring. I've definitely experienced this before. I've definitely tried to ship off hundreds of copies of the same card. This is something that comes up, and that is one of the advantages, is that they will automatically accept any buy list offer you submit to them. So sometimes, and I know that they've been burnt on this before, in the presence of bannings, right? When we have a ban that's incoming, people have become more quick to react. Sometimes in the old days. I don't know if it's as something that it can be done as quickly now, but sometimes people are able to get ahead of this. As soon as they see an announcement, they'll immediately go to Card Kingdom. They'll buy list the cards that got banned right away. They'll auto accept, and then they can send off those cards, and you'll kind of get the buy list numbers pre-ban, right? If you're quick enough on this. Obviously, a lot more people have become savvy about this. A lot more buy lists are starting to adjust. In the case of Omnath, for example, if we think about kind of the nature of Omnath, they made an announcement on, I think it was Saturday. They said that there's going to be a ban restricted announcement on Monday, right? No surprise what's going on there. This is in the middle of a big standard tournament. They make this announcement in the middle of the big standard tournament that they're going to have a ban restricted announcement on Monday. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, okay, when one deck is like 60% of the field or whatever, they're probably going to ban something from that deck, right? Omnath was kind of really kind of the most egregious card, so that's likely the card that's going to get banned. So a lot of stores have started to react sooner and sooner by updating their online buy list in anticipation of this. So you'll see by, within an hour or so of the announcement being made, their buy list will just trend down automatically, just kind of hedge their bets. If someone wants to sell them their cards anyways, right, then they're maybe instead of having to pay that kind of 60-70%, right, and they lower their buy list, maybe they're only paying 30%. If it doesn't get banned, great, they got their cards at 30% of what they would sell it for. If it did get banned, then now the price has gone down, so that 30% is going to kind of be adjusted back to that 50-60% of what they would sell it for. So that is one of the advantages of Card Kingdom. Their auto accept is something that is very, very convenient. Sometimes when you're quick about it, you can really kind of get ahead of that ban announcement or unrestricted announcement. So that's kind of one of the biggest advantages of using Card Kingdom. I've used Card Kingdom fairly extensively in the past. One of the other really big advantages of using Card Kingdom is that they have a 30% credit bonus. And what that means is that instead of taking cash, right, if a buy list is usually the cash number on their buy list. This is something that you also want to be aware of. I've seen some people kind of get misled by what happens at events before, because people see a number and then they're kind of deceived, and it's like, oh, okay, that's actually the credit number they're offering. The cash number is obviously going to be lower, or maybe some places are starting to run out of money. They don't have the money to buy your cards, especially buy big collections. If they're out of money, then their numbers are going to be, okay, this is for credit only. It has happened before. You want to be careful. With Card Kingdom, the number that you see posted is a cash number. That is what they're paying in cash for your card. So the 30% credit bonus means that if you're willing to take credit on your card instead of them paying you out in cash, they'll actually pay you 30% more. And the credit bonus goes towards anything that's on their website. I have the luxury of living in Portland, Oregon. So Card Kingdom kind of in my backyard. If I really want to make a trip up to Seattle, it's like 2.5 hours away. I can hit up Card Kingdoms, and you can actually exchange, and you can actually use Card Kingdom credit in their stores at their Mox Boarding House locations. So that's something that you can kind of use interchangeably. Obviously, not everyone lives within shooting distance of Card Kingdom, right? Not everyone can afford a 2.5 hour trip to drive there, right? If you're living across the country, obviously it's not feasible for you to do that. It is an option. The 30% bonus does apply to anything on their website. So sometimes, if for the people out there who are just kind of churning cards, looking to make their hobby as affordable as possible, maybe they need to keep up on standard decks, right? So maybe their old decks are about to rotate, or cards that have kind of fallen out of favor. Well, I don't need these. I can turn these in. I can just kind of keep up with my one standard deck that's going to be current for the format, right? This, using your credit is a good way to use Buylists. This is something that I feel like is probably underutilized. Most people seem to think that, well, I sell my cards, I'm going to take the money. But if you're just going to take the money and you're just going to go buy cards, you may as well get 30% more on your money instead of just taking the money and just walking around. So with Card Kingdom, I want to say probably more than 95% of the time I take credit. It's not something you have to use right away as well. Your credit doesn't really expire. There's no expiration date on this. So most of the time, I'll just leave some amount of money in Card Kingdom. I think I have like several $1,000s in Card Kingdom credit right now. It just kind of sits there until I need it, until there's something that I want to buy, and then I'll spend my credit. It is important to note that with Card Kingdom, when you're trying to buy cards, in my case, right, I'm trying to buy cards where there's a disparity in the market. I know that whatever I spend money on at Card Kingdom, this price, I can probably sell it more for elsewhere. So that's kind of usually what I do for restocking, as well as if I have any holes in my inventory. I'll use Card Kingdom as kind of a means to replenish my inventory and buy that way. So this is something, I feel like it's very, very grossly underutilized. People should be a little bit more aggressive about using the buy list, about using credit, especially if they're just going to turn over their cards anyways into more cards. It is important to note that when you're doing this, you have to understand that there is a very, very clear distinction between a 30% bonus on your buy list cards and what that actually means. That doesn't actually mean that you're saving 30% on cards. A lot of people seem to think, oh, 30% more, that's basically a 30% saving on cards I want to buy. That's not how the math works. It's close to how the math works, but it's not actually exactly the case. To put this down very simply, and I'll show you how you can calculate this. My phone here. So if you sell a card for $1 to Card Kingdom, they'll pay you $1 cash. A 30% bonus means that it is $1.30 in Card Kingdom credit. So what this means is that in order for you to calculate what the actual discount is, then you actually need to divide 1 by whatever the credit bump is. So 30%, so you take 1, you divide this by 1.3. So on my calculator here, this comes out to about 23% discount. So you're paying 0.769, just about 77% of the price if you were to convert this to credit. So on a card that, for example, is $10, right, in Card Kingdom dollars, right, if you were to pay this with credit, right, it comes about to about $7.7. It's important to note that Card Kingdom, because of this, they charge a premium on their cards. They can do this because they have the brand, they have the inventory, they have the means to do this, so they can afford to charge a little bit more on their cards. So you sometimes want to take that in consideration. This card, $10 in Card Kingdom money, it should be $7.7 elsewhere, $7.70 elsewhere. If I can go online and go on TCG Player and see that I could buy this card for like $6 or $7, it's better for me to just take the $1 that Card Kingdom is offering and use that money to buy on TCG Player instead, versus taking 30% bonus and then spending it on an item where that may end up being a little bit more expensive than if I just spent money buying it. This is kind of an important distinction. This is something to remember when you see at events, when you see stores offering a credit bump on their cards, right? If you trade into us, right, you have a 20% trade-in bonus, right? Again, same idea. If they offer a trade-in bonus, that means they charge more for their cards. This isn't really something that is necessarily obvious, right? But a lot of places, they do kind of bake that in. The places where you see where there's no trade-in bonus, there are some vendors that just do straight cash only, take the money and then go buy whatever you want. Those places are a little bit cheaper. Some places that do offer the trade-in bonus, they do generally charge a little bit more for the cards. If we want to use a 20% trade-in bonus, for example, if we just do 1 divided by 1.2, we see that it's about a 17% discount on their cards. So again, same idea. If you look at their card, whatever in Card Kingdom dollars or what have you, you take 17% off. Then you can see that, okay, is it cheaper to buy this card for 17% off with the credit that I acquired from them, or is it better to just take the money and then maybe buy it somewhere else where they would only be charging me 80% of the price that this place is, for example. So this is something to be aware of. This is something that it does kind of create this little game in a game. And at the end of the day, you have to kind of decide for yourself, if I'm selling cards, do I want more cards? If I want more cards, maybe I should consider taking credit. If it's something I'm not going to necessarily spend right away, right? Maybe I'm waiting. Maybe I'm okay waiting for the next set, or maybe I'm okay waiting for when Magic picks up again in paper and we can start going to events again. And I'm going to start buying back the cards for the formats that will be relevant at the time, right? These are all things that if you're okay waiting, if you want more cards, if you don't necessarily need the money right away, maybe you can go cash out on credit and just let it bank there and just let it sit. That's why I do. Mainly because I'm in no rush. I don't really have a fear about Card Kingdom all of a sudden closing their doors and then me losing my credit right away. That's not really something I'm concerned with. So credit, it's okay for me to sit there. Some people have to be a little bit more cognizant of their financial situation. Maybe they're selling cards because they're at the point where, well, rent's going to be due soon. I probably need to offload some cards to make sure that I can cover rent, right? So those people in a bit of a tighter spot financially, maybe they would have to consider, okay, I'm just going to find the place that gives me the most money for my cards. I'm going to sell my cards and then just take the money. I'm not concerned about credit. I'm not concerned about getting these cards back. I just need the money to be able to pay my bills, pay rent, what have you. So there's that kind of that balance. You have to kind of figure out what you're doing. Some people, right, obviously if they're just done with Magic, I'm selling all my Magic cards. I need to put down payment on a house, or I'm buying an engagement ring, right? Kind of real life situations, and they need to sell off these cards. Okay, well, the cash is going to be a little bit better for them, right? Which is perfectly fine, right? That's why there's both a cash buy list and the credit buy list option for these things. So that's Card Kingdom. That is kind of how to deal with them, the things to understand about them. One last thing I should mention about Card Kingdom is that when you're taking credit and you're trying to buy back cards, if you're trying to buy cards in large quantity, there's actually a stop limit on it. They actually limit their cards to 8 copies per day or something. So if you're trying to buy large copies of a card, large quantities of a card, you're going to be capped at 8. And again, similar to their buy list algorithm, Card Kingdom also has a pricing algorithm for any card that they have. If you try to buy 8, right, that's great. We'll sell you 8. That'll be in your order. If you try and place another order for those same 8 cards, they'll cancel your order. They'll say that they'll give you kind of a generic boilerplate email saying that, okay, in the interest of keeping these cards available to maximum number of customers, right, we're going to cancel your order beyond the 8 copies. So what I've done is, in the event that I do need a lot of copies of the same card, I'll wait until my order ships. As soon as they say that your order's been processed for shipping, right, then I'll place another order for 8 because the first order has already been shipped out. I'll place another order for 8. As soon as that gets shipped out, I'll place another order for 8, etc. It is fairly slow. It's fairly tedious. Their algorithm is likely to update if there's too many people trying to buy the same card within a small period of time. Then their algorithm might update the price, right? So then there's a ton of people buying within this period of time. Red cards can go from $9.99. It's the next 8 copies that are available on the website. At this point, once they've sold 100 copies or something, okay, now it's going to go up to $11.99. If another 100 copies sell, then now we're going to go to $14.99, yada yada. So the limit of 8 is kind of there as a stopper, right? There's going to be price thresholds that if enough people buy, they'll just come bump up the price threshold, and the price will keep adjusting accordingly. Once, if it gets to $14.99, for example, then it goes from 100 copies being sold to no copies being sold, then the algorithm will slowly drop the price back down to maybe $13.99, see if any copies sell. If not, then we'll go down to $12.99, right, etc. So that's kind of their algorithm. That's kind of a very simplified view of how their pricing algorithm works. So this is something to be aware of when you're trying to use Card Kingdom credit. It has become a little bit more tedious, but you can, again, if you're willing to bank it, right? We know that Black Friday is going to be around the corner soon. Black Friday is about a month away, right? Card Kingdom will likely do Black Friday sales. If you're willing to wait, right, you could probably pick up some deals there. This is another reason to just kind of hold on to your credit if you don't know exactly what you want. There may be opportunities in the future to find deals that might not be available to you right now. Mark, CK's pricing algorithm can work in your favor for obscure buy list items like pre-release foils and promo pack cards. Yes, absolutely. Their two algorithms are tied very, very closely together. Their buying algorithm and selling algorithm. They generally don't update one price until the other updates. So sometimes if a card goes out of stock, if they're completely out of stock on a card, for example, sometimes the buy algorithm may tick up, and then they may have to be overpaying or paying a higher percentage than they normally would just to get that card back in stock. So things, obscure buy list items, like Mark says here, pre-release foils, promo pack cards, right? The listing is always clear. There's not a lot of people trying to sell a promo pack card for that standard rare, right? Most of the time, most of the things that people are going to be selling, right, their buy list is usually going to consider your standard pack foil and pack card versus kind of these obscure ones, the pre-release foil stamps and the promo pack cards with the Planeswalker symbol on them. So they are a little bit different. It is something to be aware of. Sometimes like Mark says, you can kind of do like goofy things with algorithm if you're aware when these prices, because there isn't really a clear market price on them, and sometimes they do overpay on these things. So you can kind of find ways to kind of beat them around the bush there with their buy lists. So that's kind of enough on Card Kingdom. There's a few other stores I want to touch on. Channel Fireball. Channel Fireball, kind of everyone knows about them. They have a presence. They've been at most Magic Fest. They've been in the industry for a long time, so most people do know about Channel Fireball. They have a booth at all their events, at all their Magic Fests previously, right? This is all kind of past tense, but they're kind of there. They always have a presence. They always have a fairly wide stock of cards. So the biggest thing that I do want to touch on about Channel Fireball, right? The principle, if you're selling cards to them, kind of the same, right? You go online, you type in a card, right? You type in whatever you want, and then you just kind of search for it, look at the buy list. Okay, does this appeal to me? Does this not? Do I want to sell it to them? And then you just kind of make your list of cards. The biggest change, and this is one of the things that Jason Alt talked about when he was on with us with interview previously, is that the pandemic has kind of changed the face of buy listing, of how buy listing works. So one of the things that they've done, that they've kind of introduced, is their U-Box We Buy program. And essentially what this means is that you basically fill out a form, and all you have to do is, you don't have to sort anything. You don't have to put anything into a buy list. You don't have to kind of make up a list of what to sell. You don't have to sort your cards in any way. All you do is take your cards, put them in a box. Okay, I want to sell this one row of cards or this 2 row of cards or something. Put them in a box, slap a shipping label on it, and mail it to them. It'll get there, and you'll basically kind of have the in-person Grand Prix buying experience without the in-person Grand Prix buying experience. And what that means is that at Grand Prix, if you've ever sat down with a vendor, right, sometimes you can just hand them, say like, hey, here's a 5 row of cards I've been accumulating over the years, right? I just need these out of my house. So sometimes you just hand them over to a vendor, and the vendor will just sit there and they'll just put cards on a buy list. And then they'll give you, say, okay, well, this collection is going to be X amount of dollars. Card Kingdom, the U-Box We Buy program, Card Kingdom. Channel Fireball, the U-Box We Buy program they have, is kind of in the same boat. All they do is you send them the box, and then they'll say, so again, I should be clear, I haven't done this myself. This is just what I've heard from other people. They basically come back and say, okay, well, your box, we're going to offer you X amount of dollars on this. I don't actually know if they give you a breakdown. I don't know if they give you any sort of like prices. So I don't actually know all the like exact details. I just kind of heard this in passing. Again, this is useful for people that they don't care. Maybe they just say, okay, this is a box of crap. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know what Magic events are going to happen again. There's no game store near me that can buy this. I'm just going to send this off. I don't really care about it. Just Channel Fireball, whatever you want to pay me on this box, great. So this is something that does work for people. This does kind of fall on the opposite end of the spectrum of how much work you want to put in. This is obviously going to probably almost certainly be the least amount of money, but you're putting in the least amount of work. Again, no sorting required, no real work beyond just putting a label on a box and shipping it to I keep saying Card Kingdom. Channel Fireball. You send it to them, they'll do all the work for you. Again, once you factor that in, if they're doing the work for you, you're naturally going to get less on your cards than if you had probably entered the cards yourself and put them in a buy list and dealt with it that way. So this is just one of the things I want to mention very briefly about Channel Fireball. Channel Fireball does kind of offer a bump in credit as well. I believe they're also at 30% bonus on their buy list. So same idea. They have a fairly extensive inventory. They do have kind of a premium on their prices to kind of account for the bump in their buy list. So this is something you want to be aware of if you use them. Their prices, from what I can see, when they were at Magic Fest events, I was fairly aware that their buy list, they tend to be very aggressive on cards that are most likely to be competitive. I think the type of person that would be drawn to Channel Fireball, maybe you're on Channel Fireball, you're looking at content. Maybe you're reading through articles and thinking, okay, this is, a pro player wrote about this standard deck, or they wrote about this modern deck, this pioneer deck, what have you. If you look at the articles, there are links on all the cards, and the cards, if you click on those links, it'll bring you directly to a page where you can be buying the cards. So in my experience, from what I saw, the cards that they were generally targeted, the cards that they were paying the most aggressive on, were cards that would kind of fall into those, does this work in standard, does this work in modern, does this work in legacy, competitive level cards, Whereas Card Kingdom, kind of a different animal. They pay generally much better on EDH cards. They pay much better on foils, right? These are things that, because they know that they have a larger draw for EDH, right? Card Kingdom is a part of EDH Rec. They kind of provide some of the data on there. If you click on EDH Rec and you look at a card, right, one of the options you can do is you can bring up the card on the Card Kingdom website. So as a result, Card Kingdom a little bit more EDH centric compared to Channel Fireball. So you can look at that and you can kind of break it down, right? So if I want to do a very simple, hey, let's piece out my collection, I want to get rid of all my cards, maybe I will a very simple sort is if these are competitive cards, I'll probably start by looking at Channel Fireball for this subset. If I'm going to break down my EDH decks, right, I'll send kind of this batch to Card Kingdom and we can kind of separate it that way. So that's kind of a relatively basic overview of Channel Fireball. Star City Games, this is one of those things that I haven't really used Star City Games in a long time. Their buy prices have gone down a little bit over the years. It is something I've noticed. So I haven't used them as much. One of the things that is worth noting, and this will kind of be my only point about Star City, is... Oh, I have 2 points about Star City, actually. They have a buy list for everything. So... including foreign cards. So obviously you're going to beat up on foreign cards because usually they don't want them, but it is there. Maybe you just bought, a French booster box of whatever, Zendikar Rising, for example, right? You bought a French booster box because it was cheap. That's probably not really a realistic example, right? But you bought a French booster box of something a little while back. It was cheap. You found it on sale. You got a good deal on it. You kept the cards you want. You have these few cards that are technically worth money, right? The cards are, in English, they would be worth like $10, $15 or something. But as foreign, kind of harder to get a sell price on them. A lot of vendors, Card Kingdom, Channel Fireball, their buy list is for English cards only. They don't take foreign cards. Star City does. So in a pinch, in theory, you can sell those cards to them and just kind of get rid of them. You're certainly not going to get anywhere close to the most money on them, but again, fairly painless way, especially when you consider the fact that most vendors don't take foreign cards. They don't have a good means to deal with it. They don't have a way to list them on their website. Kind of a pain to list them through Crystal Commerce or list them through TCG players, so most vendors just opt not to deal with them. Star City does. One thing to know about Star City, though, is their buy list is not auto-accept like Card Kingdom. If you submit a buy list to Star City, someone will go through and they'll manually review it. And when they manually review it, then there may be things that allow them to adjust the prices. Well, maybe when you submit your buy list, the price was fine, but now maybe we bought too many of this card or something has changed, right? Maybe a ban and restricted announcement has changed the nature of this. This kind of allows them to insulate themselves against huge fluctuations in the market. It prevents them from what happened to Card Kingdom when, if you're quick enough prior to a change in the ban restricted list, it prevents people from just submitting cards very, very quickly to a buy list and kind of beating them up that way. Star City has kind of this policy in place to insulate them against that. So between the no auto accept plus kind of their lower numbers than what they had before, I haven't really used Star City as much, but it is out there. That is a consideration for people. So sometimes, again, Star City, you also have the luxury of being able to bank your credit. So in the past, right, not really applicable anymore, you could bank your credit online if you sold cards to them, and you could just wait, and then you can go to their events and their Star City opens, or if they were on the Magic Fest circuit, you can go to their events and you can buy cards, right? You can just buy cards from their case. You can just say, hey, I have credit online. Can you take it away from that? And they will. So this was especially good when you looked at kind of their HP case, their foreign case, their high-end case, right? Things that weren't necessarily as clean to list online, that sometimes they had exclusive to shows only. So this was it was a reasonable spot to find deals. But again, Star City, haven't really dealt with them a long time, so not really something that I can give too much experience to. Last data point that I want to use, Troll and Toad. A lot of people have given Troll and Toad a lot of crap over the years when people joke about like just kind of the kind of unsavory practices of Troll and Toad, or kind of their cards just not being graded accurately. I think this is something that people have kind of adopted. I think Troll and Toad unfairly gets a bad rep. Dealing with Troll and Toad, I've had nothing but perfectly fine experiences with them. I haven't had any real issues with them that they haven't been able to resolve. They're a very, very large company. They know how to act professionally. Again, this is something that I feel like people have given them an unfairly poor rep about, and it's not really something they've been really able to dig themselves out of a hole. I do have friends that work at Troll and Toad, and I kind of a little bit more privy to how they do. And again, from what I can tell, I've had no issues with them. They've always treated me well. They've always treated me fairly. They've done what needed to be done in the few times I've had issues with them. So Troll and Toad is worth noting that for Pokemon, it is a good starting point. They have a fairly comprehensive buy list. Their buy list does look a little old. It does look a little bit outdated, so it's kind of hard to follow. But again, they do have a kind of just overall buy list for basically everything. They do buy everything. If you've ever been to an event where they're there, their Gen Con booth, I've been to Gen Con a few times. Their Gen Con booth is absolutely huge. You have people that come in and buy absolutely, or that will sell absolutely everything to them. And again, they have the luxury of, when they're there, they will buy absolutely everything. So people sell all sorts of games to them. It's not just Magic, it's not just Pokemon. Those are things that they're known for because they've been in the industry for a while. But they'll buy sports cards, right? They'll buy miniatures, they'll buy Yu-Gi-Oh, right? They'll buy literally everything that they can sell, and they do sell a fair amount. So it kind of gives them that luxury. So as a result, their buy list, even though it does look a little bit outdated, it is kind of hard to follow. There is actually a buy list for everything. They have a buy list for bulk in all quantities. They have a buy list for sealed product. They have a buy list for single. So it's a good starting point. It is not necessarily something that I would consider, but if you are looking to, perhaps as a store, trying to figure out a buy list for buying Pokemon, for example, Troll and Toad is a reasonable place to start. Despite what we think, a lot of people, I imagine, who may be listening to this, cast, probably a little bit more experienced. They probably can shy away from Troll and Toad. Troll and Toad doesn't necessarily offer the best prices, but they have the luxury of being comprehensive. If you are looking to sell something, use Troll and Toad as a starting point. And I know there's plenty of stores that buy against the Troll and Toad buy list. Sometimes they know that, okay, well, we don't deal with this, right? Maybe we don't buy this particular miniature game, but I know Troll and Toad well. I'll just, whatever Troll and Toad says they'll buy it for, I'll just buy underneath it and then buy it from the customer and then sell it to Troll and Toad. That's a viable business model. That's something that people have done in the past. So if you're looking for some more obscure items, Troll and Toad, good starting point because they have a very, very comprehensive buy list. So it is worth noting. It is worth noting that they're also a little bit slow to update their buy list. So sometimes you're trying to find something that's relatively obscure, right? You're probably going to get an old number or a number that hasn't been updated yet. If it's something that they're out of stock on the sales side, they're going to be out of stock on the buy side until they acquire it by some means where someone sells it through a buy list or they acquire it through their store. And then when that person goes to list it to sell online, that's going to be when the person updates the buy list and the sell price. So it is something to consider regarding Troll and Toad. Again, it doesn't matter if you use all these sites, right? I'm not necessarily saying that I sell the Troll and Toad, I sell Star City. It is important to note that these exist as data points. If you're looking to maximize your money, it is worth being aware of, hey, these options are out there. I should know about them. So with that, if you do want to go sell everything, right? Some people are kind of at the point in their lives, as we mentioned, they're just kind of done with Magic. They're just kind of done with Pokemon. They're happy to sell out and they're ready to move on to other things. Perfectly fine. You do have to ask yourself, right? We mentioned this a few times before. How much work do you want to put in? How much time do you want to invest in this? And how much money you're looking to get out of it? If you want more money, expect to put in more time. If you value your time higher, you don't want to deal with all the nitty gritty, right? There's painless ways to do this, right? Channel Fireball, U-Box, we buy, right? All you have to do, quite literally, put everything you want in a box, send it off to them, it's done, right? And they'll just give you a number. And it should, again, be expected that that number is going to be lower than what it would be if you did the work yourself. So that's fairly straightforward. The last thing I do want to touch on here is it is important to note that buy lists do impact the market. And what I mean by this is that depending on how visible they are, buy lists do affect the market. People are going to be aware that buy lists exists. At real life events before everything got shut down, you kind of had a micro economy inside the Magic Fest inside the event itself, because a lot of people will be vying for these cards on these buy lists. A lot of the vendors will be vying for these cards. So it kind of became a game, right? Like, okay, well, is this really the maximum you can pay? What if I go $1 above what you're paying, right? Does this mean I'm going to get more copies if I pay that price, right? Or, okay, and then now you start just kind of creating this arms race. That's something that's happened at events before. It's something I'm very aware of. So it kind of creates this game where, okay, how much can I really buy for? Or what happens if someone comes up and they have a bunch of copies? Maybe they bought this copy as a spec years and years ago. Their spec paid off, right? And now they have 20 copies to sell. How much can you pay? And do you really want them to go shop it around and try and sell it to another vendor? So it did kind of create this little game. This often would impact the market prices. Kind of a little bit earlier in the year when Guy's Cradle took that huge bump when it kind of popped off and it went from being $300 to $400 kind of up to that $1,000 range, right? Channel Fireball, they came out, they said, okay, we have a buy list on this card, $600 for your near-mint Guy's Cradle, which was a big number at the time. That was actually higher than any other vendor offered at the time. That was more than Card Kingdom, right? It was a big number. I don't know how many they bought that number, but it did create kind of that floor on Guy's Cradle. And this is a way that buy lists can move the market, because by creating this floor, people will know that if my Guy's Cradle is clean, I need to be able to get at least $600 for it. Realistically, the price was much higher. That's not necessarily the best example, but kind of at these events before, you would see that, okay, if every vendor has a card on their buy list, and it's most of the buy lists are pretty close to what the TCG low price is, for example, that's something to be worth watching. If there's enough demand on this card, if these vendors are selling through these cards fast enough that they won't be paying 90%, there might be something going on with this card, and maybe you can go out and buy them. And depending on how much time elapsed, right, maybe you could place the order on TCG, it could arrive at your house, and you can even sell it next weekend if the card was hot enough. It's a fairly inefficient way to look at the market, but the opportunity was there, and you have to remember, if I see those copies on TCG Player and I go out and buy them, the price is going up because the cheap copies are gone. So the next copies are available, maybe a little bit higher. So the price is going to be raised a little bit. Those cheap copies disappear, right? The price keeps going up. And what we're seeing is that with no real way to restock right now, these prices, cheap copies are slowly disappearing. Even if the card sells slowly, maybe the card only sells, maybe there's some card out there where there's only one copy of this card that sells a day on TCG Player, right? After a week, 7 copies are gone. Right? How many copies of that card can there realistically be? If people aren't able to restock this card, it's kind of obscure, right? We kind of talk about some old school cards, some reserve list cards kind of go through this natural attrition phase where the copies slowly disappear on TCG Player and people see an opportunity. Okay, now I'm just going to buy out TCG Player and reset the price. So buy lists, they do kind of affect the market in that way. It is something to be aware of. Regarding Pokemon, something that I do want to bring attention to. David Adams, Card World, right? They're a big online store. They have a buy list. There's a buy list on Pokemon booster boxes. This was one of the emails that they sent out earlier this week. This is, again, another example of them setting a floor on their buy list. Mark, I do see your comment. I'll get to it in just a second. I just need to finish the thought here. This is offering a floor on these boxes. So they're basically, the buy list says, the email kind of said very briefly, hey, we're buying all vintage booster boxes. One of the things that's on there, kind of the first and foremost thing, is Pokemon base set first edition booster box, right? So kind of the Holy Grail. There's been a lot of attention about this. They're going out, they're saying it's at the top of their buy list. They're paying $250,000 on that box. A month ago, right, about 6 weeks ago, right, we had that record setting sale heritage auction, right? That was Logan Paul's box, $198,000. We were thinking about how big that deal is. This is a store that is willing to pay $250,000 on this booster box. This sets a floor. Anyone who is looking to buy this booster box needs to know that, okay, well, there's a store out there paying at least $250,000. I need to go out and pay. If I want a box for myself, I need to pay at least this much. And most people out there realistically know that if they have this box, it's going to be much more. Like, realistically, there are people out there who are looking to pay $300,000, $350,000 on this booster box. So, but this sets a floor. Same idea. If you kind of scroll down, that one's kind of an extreme example, right? You can't really place that. You kind of go further down, you can look at, there's some more recent boxes. I've kind of talked about black and white before. I thought black and white was kind of a good way to identify as being the next best thing, right? Maybe something that we can buy next because it hasn't really popped off yet. You look at these prices, some of these prices, right? Kind of the Premier Box Plasma Storm is really the go-to. Their buy price is $2,750 on that box. Last month in the last cycle for PWCC, the auction on a Plasma Storm booster box that they had listed sold for $3,600. When you factor in the eBay fees, the PWCC, the cut that they take for listing and selling this item, on $3,600, if you're paying kind of, let's say 10%, for example, I think the fees are a little bit higher than that for PWCC, but let's say they take 10% on $3,600, right? If we take 10% off, I'm going to look because I don't want to do math in my head and look like a fool. They're paying you $3,240. That's the intake. You do have to remember, you have to ship this box to PWCC. They have to have the box in their hand, right? So there's some extra costs that are incurred to you. So when you start deducting these numbers, it looks like you'd be getting more by doing it yourself. But again, that's an add step. Here, they are paying $2,750. That is the floor. That is the absolute minimum a box should go for. And clearly anyone savvy enough to use this data, anyone looking at this, can probably think that, well, I can sell more for myself. But again, the idea is that they're paying this much. They're raising the floor. And sometimes when people are ahead of the curve, if you are the first person to set the buy list on this, you are basically raising the price on the product below this floor. It happens with singles as well. If someone doesn't go out there and say, I have a buy list, or this is how buyouts occur, right? Sometimes they say, I'm going to buy every card below X dollars. I think this card is going to be good in standard, right? Maybe I'll buy every card out below $1. Anything that's below $1, I'm just going to buy right now. And if I make this public, if I start going out and telling people online, on Twitter, maybe I make a Facebook post about it, I'm buying all copies of this card at $1, you're resetting the price on that card. So anything that was below that is going to just disappear because people are just going to buy and then send it to you. And you're changing the market price on this card. So that's something to consider. That is kind of a side effect of buy lists, of buy prices, and how they can really change the face of the market. It is also important to note that buy lists will kind of help you determine if a price is real or if it's artificial. If it's artificially bought out, right, some of the things like masterpieces, reserve list cards, things that exist in low volume you're unlikely to have a store that is going to have a huge surplus on these, going to have a huge stock on these, right? Sometimes when cards are subject to buyout, okay, the card is bought out, is there an opportunity for me to make money here? If the card is real, if there's a card that has gone up organically, if a card is something that slowly sells over time and the price will slowly creep up, stores will have to raise their buy lists in order to accommodate for that. If a card sells out for $20, right? Previously I paid like $15 as an example. Okay, it sold out $20 now, right? My next copy is I'm going to sell at $22. Well, I now need to be buying this card for $16. Sells out $22. I'm going to list at $25. Okay, this card is selling really fast. I need to be paying $20 on this, right? And if it happens organically, we can see the buy list slowly creep up to keep that spread between the sell price and the buy price relatively consistent. So as it goes up, sell price goes up, buy price goes up, sell price goes up, buy price goes up. If all of a sudden the sell price goes from here to here, if the card happened organically, if the card was actually real and it was a real buyout, or if it was a real depletion supply, then we would see the buy list go like this. If it stays down here, that means that vendors aren't really willing to bite yet. It may be artificial, so maybe the buy list doesn't change as substantially. Maybe the sell price might be here, but the buy price might only go up this much. And then as a result, we'll slowly see the sell price start to creep down as there's no real demand for that card. So I do want to touch on Mark's comment here. Have you had any experience with buy list offers via webcam? Cool Stuff offers this service. Mark, that is something that I'm aware of. I have had people ask me about that. You're not the first person. I have looked at it. I actually haven't done it myself. That's I have dealt with Cool Stuff a few times. I know, like, I'm friends with some of the guys there. That's not something that I am looking to do. I'm looking to be a bit more streamlined about what I do. I would trust them, right? I don't need to have them verify I don't need to verify what they're doing via webcam. So I'd be happy if I have these boxes of cards, I would just send it off to them to sell. For the most part, I don't really have that anymore. For the most part, most things I do sell myself fairly well. The only time I really access buy lists is when I'm if I need the credit. If I want a bonus in credit, I'll sell them cards and just kind of offload it that way. Otherwise, I'm fairly okay just selling cards myself and okay selling it slowly. Again, if I do think something is going to change very rapidly, sometimes I'll just kind of take the Card Kingdom route. It's fast, it's efficient, it's auto accept. I can just click, put the cards I want in, and then just send it off without having to kind of deal with it too much myself. So I hope that kind of answers your question. I know that I haven't really had experience, so I can't really speak to it. So I'm maybe not the best person to ask about that, unfortunately. So I wish I could give you more advice there, but I can't. So that kind of wrap up today's episode regarding buy lists. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of moving pieces. I do expect that buy lists will continue to evolve in the future. If we ever see events return, right, I think buy lists will be something that will be very, very hotly contested at events. That will be kind of a big deal. The only problem is we don't know what the future looks like. We don't know what is going to be different after elections, right? We don't know how the market is going to respond. We don't know what the future of COVID looks like. So it's kind of hard to say. We really can't predict, right? We are faced with the potential reality that events might not be coming back at all. It just may not be feasible in a post-COVID world that people will be wanting to go back to convention centers, to tight spaces with a lot of people, and be doing this again. So it is something to aware for the people who are out there trying to figure out a way to sell cards. Look at buy lists, look at use kind of all this data, figure out, again, fundamentally, do you want to do more work and get more money, or do you not care? Do you want to send it off and let someone else deal with it and get whatever money you can? Those are really the questions you have to answer when dealing with buy lists. Kind of use all the tools available to you, especially if you're really trying to maximize how much money you're getting. Maybe every penny really does matter to you. Put in the work. Look at the different tools that are available out there, right? Use the Card Kingdom. Use Channel Fireball. I'm willing to bet that even Star City, there may be cards where Star City pays the highest. That's something that's a very real reality. So use these tools that are available to you. Again, understand that these are all different data points. If you are really trying to maximize and get the most, you'll have to kind of bounce around and see what you can do to get the most out of it and go from there. So that's kind of a wrap on today's episode for buy lists. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. Thank you all for listening. As always, I enjoy the feedback and interacting with all the people who have come and listened to this. So thank you again for that. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe, have a good weekend, and we will be back here next Monday with more. Thanks again for listening.